So the first thing is we're going to be looking at something that we've already discussed quite a bit. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot more time on it. And just some practical ideas for having regular sadhana in the temple and at home. And home can mean your own home. It could also mean where you work with other people. So maybe 2 or 3 families getting together at various homes. Maybe 2 or 3 families getting together at various homes. It doesn't necessarily mean it would just have to be at your home. So I have some thoughts here. I don't know if I'm going to write them on the board. I'm going to suggest some ideas, and then maybe some of you will also have some ideas. So one suggestion, the general suggestion is that you do a little of both no matter what situation you're in. So many, many years ago when we were raising our children, we had the idea that regular sadhana had to be in the morning at a temple. It had to be. And that's how we trained our children. Without thinking that having a temple morning program at a temple might not be very practical for most people in their lives. If you had to go to work at 7:30, you live a half an hour drive from the temple, and if you trained your children that regular sadhana and Krishna consciousness has to be at a temple, when that's not possible, they may give up sadhana completely. So I saw that there was a negative side to training the children to always come to the temple. And also we mentioned before, you may be at temples where there are people who are very negative toward the children, or where there's not good facility for the children, and then the children are being indirectly trained that having morning sadhana is very uncomfortable and difficult and stressful. So I think for those 2 reasons, one is if you happen to be at some point in your life at a temple where there's a lot of stress for the children. But even if you don't, even if you're at a temple that's just the perfect, ideal, custom design for children's sadhana, it's still good practice to train your children that regular sadhana can take place outside of a temple. We don't want them to think it has to be a temple or nothing. So for those 2 reasons alone, and there are many other reasons, but for those 2 reasons alone, I would suggest something I never would have suggested 30 years ago, and that is that even if you have an ideal situation, you're 5 minutes walk from the temple is the perfect swarga for children, that still you have at least once a week a program at home. And that's a regular time when you do a program at home. All right, let's look first at home programs, and then we're going to look at temple programs. Just some practical, I'm going to throw out some practical ideas. You can add to this list, but these are things that I thought of. Having some sadhana as far as possible at a regular time. It does not have to be the morning, it can be the evening. But when things are done at a regular time, they're much more likely to happen. And by the way, another way to make things more likely to happen is tie them, time-wise, to something that does regularly happen. If you have something in your family that happens at a regular time, tie your morning sadhana or your evening sadhana to that. So we're going to have some sadhana before we have dinner at night, for example. Have some sort of regular place, a special place. Some temple room area in your house. As far as possible, have everybody participate. And sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes the husband isn't so inclined, or the wife isn't so inclined, or some family member isn't inclined. But as far as possible, to get everybody to participate and to have some service to do. You know, one of the best ways to involve the children is that they have something to do. They have to make the ghee wicks, or they have to pick the flowers, or they have to wash the arti tray, or they lead one of the prayers. And you can even have a rotating schedule of who takes what responsibility in the sadhana. I know of many adult devotees where the main thing that pulls them to come to the temple is not just the sadhana program, but they have some responsibility of service. And I know people who've given themselves a responsibility of service just to make sure that they're going to get there. Okay. You may think about rewards and consequences. I don't want to talk about this too much because that's a whole other topic about forms of discipline. Some people find them helpful. Some people are totally against it. But you certainly want to consider it and talk about it. Do we want to have any rewards or consequences for various behavior in sadhana? Be careful that you don't associate strong negative feelings with Krishna conscious practices. So I'd be very, very careful about punishments or negative consequences for non-participation. Just be careful. You don't want the children... in psychology, sometimes this is called triggers or anchors. Sometimes it's called spillover. If I have some emotional experience, positive or negative, I may associate it with things around me. Like if you have a really negative or positive experience at a particular place that could have happened anywhere, you may associate those emotions with that place. We have some strong emotional associations with certain food, with certain music, with certain places. Correct? So that can also happen with our Krishna conscious practice. And I mentioned this before, I'm just going to emphasize it again. I get the whole seminar just on this one point. But to be very, very careful if you set up some system of punishment or consequences that the children do not associate Krishna conscious practice with punishment. Consider your own needs and schedules. Make a sadhana program that's going to be in harmony with your own life. Otherwise, you're not going to continue it. If you say, okay, I'm going to get up at 2 every morning and have a program, but because of your job, you don't get to bed till 11 at night, then it's just not going to happen. So it has to be something that... This is part of the problem of thinking that regular sadhana has to be exactly the way it's done at the temple. Have something that works for you. Regular sadhana does not have to go from 4:30 to 9:30 every morning. That, honestly, is a monk program. That is not a grahasta program. Most grahastas cannot spend 4:30 to 9:30 every morning on sadhana. Maybe some people can. Do something that works for you. Maybe you do some things in the morning, some things in the evening. Maybe you do some special things only on the weekends. As I was saying, about my grandchildren's other grandfather, he's doing a special class once a week on Krishna conscious philosophy and practice. So, work out something that you're going to be able to maintain. Be honest, be realistic. There's very few things more discouraging than setting up a program that you're not able to do and failing at it. And then you say, well, I tried and I couldn't do it. Much better to be successful at a smaller thing than fail at a bigger thing. And you might even start with something small that you can add on to. But do something that's real and that works for you. Prabhupada talks about this in Nectar Devotion, that over-endeavor is taking on spiritual vows that you can't do. Again, this is a relationship with Krishna. If someone says that they're going to do something for me and they can't do it, it's much more disturbing than if they never said they were going to do it at all. And it's much better to under-promise and over-deliver than over-promise and under-deliver. Under-promise and over-deliver. Much more exciting. So start off with something you can do. You can always add to it. You can always add to it sometimes. If you say, okay, every day we're at least going to have a basic program, 20 minutes of kirtan, 20 minutes japa, 20 minutes class. We're going to do that as a family. And some days you might add to it, but you said that's going to be our minimum. Or 10 minutes kirtan, 10 minutes japa, 10 minutes class, something. I know a devotee who reads one line of Bhagavatam a day, and now she's on the middle of the 4th canto. So something, little drops of water wear away stone. Do something that you can do and you know you're going to be able to do that's going to be in harmony with your family. Okay, if you know that you can do something big and fancy and everyday, great, go for it. I don't want to discourage any of you who can do a 5-hour program a day. But if you can't, do something that's going to actually happen. That's much more important. Krishna's much more pleased with that. just like I would be, right? If you do a regular program at home, have some days when you take your children to the temple. So if you have a program at home 6 days a week, maybe 1 day a week you go to the temple, or 2 days in a month you go to the temple. You also want to give your children some exposure to a temple. And it also can be wonderful to have home programs, as I mentioned briefly before, with other families. So families can rotate. And I'll tell you, that's much more inspiring. If I know I've got to get up at 3 to do a program at home, and well, the program's only going to happen if I do it. So if I get up at 4, I get up at 5, well, it really doesn't matter. But if somebody else is coming to my house at 5, then I'm going to get up. Or if somebody's expecting me to go to their house at 5, I'm much more likely to get up and actually do something. So that's also very helpful. You might have charts for progress. Now, off the topic of children, I know one very successful business person, devotee, who runs a very, very successful business. And he would make charts for his own sadhana. You know, how many rounds did I chant today? How many of those were focused rounds? How many minutes did I spend reading today? And he was working at trying to give up coffee. So he would write down, you know, how much coffee did I drink today also. So he had a negative one in there too. And he wrote down what was really important to him and focused on that. So you might have a chart for your own progress. You might have a chart for your children's progress, if they're old enough. And if they're really old enough, you might want to talk with them about what they want to have on their chart. What kind of sort of things do they want to work on? You might also have a chart for activities. You know, who does what? Who has a turn doing what services? And then getting rid of spiritually draining things in your house. Getting rid of anything in your life that's a spiritual vacuum cleaner that sucks out all your spiritual energy. You all know what those are, right?
No.
TV. That's a big one. TV, movies, sometimes computer games. Either get rid of them or really cut them down. And sometimes people ask me, how do I get rid of them? And I say, well, there's a wire that's in the back of them. And you just pull on it. One thing you might find helpful if you're struggling to get rid of bad habits is to meditate on the story of Krishna killing the Sakatashura demon. Do you know that story? So it was a festival day, and Mother Yasoda laid Krishna down to sleep, and she laid him down under a cart, maybe to give him shade from the sun. It was a hand cart with utensils on it for the festival. And baby Krishna woke up and he wanted to eat. But it was a big festival day, so everybody was talking and making noise and musicians. So when he was crying, Yasoda didn't hear him. So he just touched his little foot to the wheel of the cart, and the whole cart collapsed. The cart collapsed, and all the metal utensils went here and there and made a big noise. And there was actually a demon hiding in the cart. There was a demon in the shape of the cart that Krishna killed. So a cart is an inanimate object. It's lethargy. It represents, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, lethargy and bad habits. So if we have some bad habit, if we really want to watch this one TV show, we really like to watch these movies, we really like to look at this nonsense on the internet, and it's stealing our time. You know, we're staying up till 11:30 at night, and there it is, 9 o'clock, we say, I got to go to bed so I can get up and have my nice sadhana, and then you are there till 11 o'clock at night watching something that you know is a useless waste of time. You already know that. It's not like it's some sort of big intellectual realization that what I'm watching is foolish. So you can meditate on baby Krishna kick the cart. Read that pastime, and whenever your mind says, I want to do this, I want to watch this, just think, kick the cart, 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 kick the cart. And it'll be hard at first. It will be hard at first. Changing habits is always hard at first. It takes altogether 21 days to get a new habit. Be patient. Stick with it. And every time your mind says, I want to watch this, I want to do this, I want to do this, just kick the cart, kick the cart. And meditate on that lila, and Krishna will help you. That little baby Krishna with his little foot can just kick apart a whole big metal cart. So he can take care of our bad habits. If you fall back into the habit again, then pick yourself up and try to go through the procedure again. You really want to restrict your children's indulgence in these bad habits, because you're going to have a very hard time getting your children to be enthusiastic to perform sadhana bhakti if they are very involved with TV, movies, and computer games, especially the role-playing games, which are particularly engrossing. You all know what role-playing games are, and if you don't worry about it, but that's where people actually take on a character in a game. They take on the persona of someone in a computer game. They often play with other people. And I have seen people, I have never played one, thank you Krishna, but I've seen people stay on the computer for 10, 15 hours at a time and not eat because they're absorbed in these games. So same with watch what books that you have in your house. But, we have so many problems with TV and movies and the internet that we forget about books. Think about what kind of stories there are in your house. Are there inspirational stories? Are there stories about people that are religious, that are Krishna conscious, at least that are religious, at least that are moral and pious? Watch what you're exposed to and watch what your children are exposed to. This also depends on your association. One of my kids told me the other day, Mata, if I want to change my behavior, I have to change who I hang out with. So this is a really big point. Who do your children associate with? Who do you associate with? Or just think it was like funny. I know one very happily married couple, one of the happiest married couples I've ever seen. And he said, one of the secrets to a happy marriage is make sure that your wife doesn't have friends who have a much higher standard of living than you do. So, choose your association. If all your friends have the latest this gadget and that gadget, and if this smartphone and that thingy and this thing and the other thing, and they're just always plugged in. I mean, I've seen people in the kirtans, with their... All right, Krishna. So be careful who you associate with. But then you have to keep up with the Joneses, and you've got to get all these things, and you've got to know about all these things, and you've got to know about this sports game, and this thing, and the other thing. So that really makes doing sadhana difficult. So that's a little negative thing. Any other thoughts from any of you about sadhana at home, or anything that any of you would like to share? Yes?
Well, not a thought, but just a question. In terms of materialistic books for kids written by non-devotees, should they be totally banned in the house, or do we have to use our judgment to see whether they are,
Materialistic books should be totally banned. It is possible to find many books written by people who are not devotees of Krishna or members of the Krishna consciousness movement that are very inspiring and very enlivening for our devoted children. Books that encourage lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion, malice, illicit sex life, meat eating, intoxication, gambling, definitely keep them out of your house. As much as you possibly can. Yes? But there's many, 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 many books written by people who are, at least that have morals and ethics in them. There's many books that promote morality and ethics, and good qualities and good character. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. And, we're not the only religious people in the world. There are people in other religious systems who share many of the same values that we have. Maybe not all, but many. And it's certainly enough that their books are valuable. I mean, one thing we're fortunate of in America is there's become a huge influx of books written by Christians for children and young people. And often they're not really Christian. They're often just generally theistic. They kind of hide their Christianity, which is really nice, because if you don't know a lot about Christianity, it doesn't jump at you. And some of them are just wonderful. And then there's also a lot of very good nonfiction books. By the way, good books, you cannot divide good and bad books according to fiction and nonfiction. The biography of a degraded person is not necessarily a good book. And a fictional story that teaches morality and ethics and religion is not necessarily a bad book. There are some fables in Bhagavatam even, like Puranjana's story, and the analogies that Jed Bharat tells to Maharaj Rahugana. So we're not against analogies. Prabhupada would quote Aesop's fables. Prabhupada would quote the Iliad and the Odyssey. Prabhupada said our children should read the literature that's recognized. Prabhupada would quote Macbeth. He quoted Merchant of Venice. So, in fact, on one morning walk, all Srila Prabhupada did with the devotees is tell the story of the Merchant of Venice. But, and speaking about book distribution, Prabhupada quoted, what is her name, Portia? The quality of mercy is not strange, it falls with gentle rain from heaven. It is twice blessed, bless those who give and those who receive. So, you know, it depends how you're going to label. But something that's promoting materialistic greed and envy and avarice and lust, yeah, please get it out of your house. Be discriminating.
Regarding sadhana, now I'm talking about my child. He's 7 years old. So we try to get him to do one round a day.
Can you park that?
Yes.
Okay. Anything more specifically on having sadhana at home? Yes.
Is it appropriate to give rewards for the sadhana?
There's many different opinions, so I'm not going to come down on one way or the other. I just say be careful. It can be very helpful, but be careful that the children are not doing sadhana just for the reward. But it can be very helpful, especially with very young children. You can certainly have rewards and consequences that are natural. You know, if you lead the kirtan nicely, you can get some more facility in responsibility that you want to have. It's like one of my grandchildren really wanted to cook. And we said to her, she's not. We said to her, well, you have to show that you're responsible. So it can be something like that. Okay, if you're responsible to give the deities water every day, or if you're responsible to set up the RT tray, then we can teach you how to cook. So it can be a reward like that, not necessarily that you're giving them toys and money and things like that, but something that's a natural. Okay, I want to move on. I want to look at sadhana at the temple. Now, this really is much more for temple managers. I don't think we have any of them. So I really focus there on the temples should consider if they ever want to have an adapted kind of program that really is meant to facilitate families with young children or families who work. So I was once at a temple where they did that. The Mangalarti ended at 5. There was no announcements, there was no mantras, there was no reading. We went right into japa. Japa was from 5 to 6. Then Guru Puja was from 6 to 6:15. Tulsi Arti was from 6:15 to 6:25. Bhagavatam class was from 6:25 to 7:15. Greeting the deities was at 7:15. Bhajans were at 7:20. Morning program was over at 7:30. Then there was prasadam. You could go to work, you could go to school. Now there was just 1 hour of japa, but if you're going to bring your children, 1 hour of japa is about the most that young children can either participate in or sit through or be content with. And of course, you weren't able to get a full 16 rounds done in that program. You'd have to chant some rounds before or after or something like that. But it was a really nice program that facilitated people who worked or went to school rather than, 4:30 to 9:30. So sometimes temples can do that, setting up, or maybe they can do that sometimes. Maybe, talk about having 1 day a month where there's some sort of special program. Rooms in the temple, try to negotiate with the temple authorities. There's a room where I can go and bring my young children, have a speaker. Having special programs for children when there's programs going on for the adults. And to really speak to especially the brahmacharis and people or householders who've never had children about if you see someone has a bad attitude and working with them on that. And working with the attitude. All right, you asked about specifically engaging children in japa. I give a 1 hour seminar on children in japa. I don't really want to get into that much now. So I'll just say very, 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 very briefly. Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan seemed to be discouraging about having young children have japa time. It seemed to be something that he was discouraging as something that was mandated for young children. My suggestions on this, and I would have said something different 25, 30, 35 years ago than I'm going to tell you now. And please learn from me. please, 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 please. Don't make the mistakes that I made as a new devotee fanatic. I'd say that your main thing you want to do with kids in japa is that it should be a positive experience. Japa is the most difficult thing that we can possibly ask from a child in Krishna consciousness. Because kirtan is, everything else has something that's also pleasing materially. Kirtan is nice music and it's dancing. Everybody likes music and dancing. Everybody likes good food. Philosophy is intellectual stimulation. Japa really doesn't have any element of material sense gratification in it. And it's very difficult for young children. The main thing you want to look for with japa in young children is that they have a positive emotional experience with it. I'd say much more than trying to build a habit. And if you can't get a positive emotional experience with it, leave it alone. And set an example, and encourage, and just let it be. Let them come to it when they're ready to come to it. Even if that means it's when they're 16 or 17 years old. That's my suggestion now. I would not have said that 35 years ago, but that's my suggestion now. And the other thing is, if you do choose to have a mandated japa time for young children, and this is something I did do from the beginning, make it an amount of time, not an amount of rounds. Until a child's at least 12, maybe 14, I would never have an amount of rounds because they will learn to cheat. You will be training them to cheat, 99%. Unless you're going to be like hawk-eyed, watching their fingers as they chant. They will say, got my round done. You know, better, we're having 5 minutes, we have 5-minute japa time every day. If you want to make a mandated japa time, please make sure it's by time, not by number of rounds, and make sure that it is fun. That it's fun, that there's some element in it that's really emotionally positive. However you do that. Make sure you talk about japa sometimes, you preach about it, not preach about it like this, preach about it like this. You know, I had young kids recently I was working with who didn't want to read Bhagavatam, and I said, you know, they said, we already know the stories. I said, no, it's not knowing the stories. I said, this is a magic book. It's not an ordinary book. That if you listen to Bhagavatam nicely, and we'll be doing this class, Krishna willing, I'll be teaching class Monday morning before I go to the airport. One of the nicest verses in the whole Bhagavatam, nicest purports in the whole Bhagavatam. If you can really listen to Bhagavatam with rapt attention, Krishna becomes manifest. It's not a book, it's a person. And what we're looking for in japa is that it's not sounds, it's a person. It's Krishna. It's Goloka Vrindavan manifesting in your heart. So, if for you japa is an austerity that you're getting through because you made a vow or you're told to do it and you're just counting the time and you're looking at your watch and you're like, when is it going to get done so I can do something else? You're probably not in a very good position to encourage your child to chant japa. You have to chant japa. So look at what your own attitude is, what you're experiencing. Really work, really work on your own japa and be able to encourage and enliven your child in japa. Have it be something that's very inspiring for your child. Please be careful with japa. Okay. I don't want to get into that too much because I want to go on to something else. I do know of children who did chant rounds of japa when they were young and chanted them well. There are exceptions, but they are exceptions. They really are exceptions. And especially if it's coming from you. You have to chant 1 round, or you have to chant 5 rounds. You're probably training them to cheat. And even if it comes from them, be careful. I knew a kid who said he wanted to chant rounds because his older brother was chanting rounds. It was a very envious, competitive thing, and he was also cheating. The older brother wasn't cheating, but the younger brother was cheating. So he could compete with his older brother. And finally the father said, you can chant but not on beads, and then he stopped chanting completely. Because he was just doing it out of envy. So be very careful. I have seen children who really like to chant rounds at a young age. I knew one 7-year-old girl, her mother called me up, she was my student. This was the one who's now a teacher in Dallas and who's teaching her kids Brahma Samhita. And the mother called me up, I have such a problem with my daughter, I don't know what to do. What's the problem? She won't go to sleep. Why not? Because she wants to chant 16 rounds a day. If she hasn't finished by 7 o'clock, she's hiding under the covers to finish her round. I said, that's a good problem. That's unusual. That's definitely unusual. And I know another child, this is very interesting. I know another child who, because of association with his uncle, who's also a devotee, at the age of 10, I believe, started chanting 16 rounds a day. Chanting 64 rounds on Ekadasi, and on Janmashtami chanted 150 rounds. Then he stopped. When his uncle moved away, he stopped. After a while, he didn't have that association. He stopped. Now he doesn't chant any japa. And then, some other devotees were talking to him. He met one sannyasi and got inspired again, and now he's 13. He was chanting maybe 1 round a day for a few months, then again he stopped. And his parents very wisely leave him alone about japa. They just leave him alone. You want to chant japa? Fine. You don't want to chant japa? Fine. I have never met a child who could chant 150 rounds of japa, 10-year-old child, except this one child. So they don't pressure him at all. They leave it. I don't know what he'll be like. I'll have to give you another report. Right now he's 13, so I have to give you another report. 7 or 10 years, see what happens to him. But those are rare cases. What you really find is the child will say, okay, I'll chant, and then they chant for 1 day, and then they don't chant another day, and they chant, 1 round here, and whatever. That's much more common. By the time a child's 12 to 14, depending on the child and your relationship with them, you can start saying, okay, what about chanting a certain number of rounds? But be careful. Watch your own attitude towards japa. Make sure that it's not a punitive thing or a heavy thing in any way. So I'd much rather a child grow up not having chanted a lot of japa, but the times that they had were very exciting and very rewarding and very deep, and they really felt connected with Krishna, than a child who chanted a lot of japa because their parents told them to, and they hated it, and they couldn't wait till it was over, and they grew up thinking, when I'm grown up, I ain't ever going to do this. So just be careful with that. Okay, I want to move on to the last thing, as to how we can stay inspired. This you have on your worksheet. I'm not going to fool you. Trying to be Krishna conscious at the modern time is hard. It's even hard if you're in India.
Yes.
What to speak of in Australia? It's not easy. And please don't think it's automatically easy for all the brahmacharis, by the way. They have their own struggles. But trying to be Krishna conscious when you're working, when you're going to school, when you're raising children, it's not easy. Anyone who tells you, oh, it's just easy, you can just do it, they probably never did it. I'll tell you it's valuable, though, to do something for Krishna that's a little hard. It's valuable. If someone does something for us, if someone does something for me that's easy, it's not worth as much as if somebody made a sacrifice. Love is in sacrifice. And how satisfying we find it to make a sacrifice for someone we love. To really go out of our way to do something special. So how to keep it up? First of all, getting practical help. So one of the biggest difficulties with being a Krishna conscious grahastha is the lack of extended family. So one of your benefits if you're Indian is you might have extended family. You might not anymore. Your extended family might be in Hyderabad. But you're more likely to have it than if you're not Indian. But get some practical help. If you've got a mother-in-law, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, uncle, grandfather who's a Vaishnava, work together. Don't try to do everything yourself. Don't be isolated. This is especially true for the women. It is very unnatural for a woman just to be home alone with little kids and dishes and food to cook and floors to clean. That is not a natural situation. A natural situation is the women are with other women and they take turns doing things. And Prabhupada said women are not just for taking care of the children, they're also meant for work and devotion. Please don't think that Krishna consciousness means, if you're a woman, that your only business is cooking, washing the dishes, cleaning the floor, doing the laundry, and feeding the baby, and changing the nappies. That's there, undoubtedly, but that's not everything. But it's very hard if you don't have any help. Often that's all you have time for. So sharing of responsibilities, if you don't have biological extended family, create a spiritual extended family. Different people take turns watching the children, and maybe you can go to the temple and do some deity worship, or you can do some preaching. It's certainly true for the men, but I see this is a much bigger problem for the women. And for the men, please help your wife to get these sort of networks of help. I'm not saying that you have to be an untraditional father and husband and wash the dishes yourself. I mean, if you want to, joy, all glories to you. If you want to cook a meal a week, that's lovely. And I know some women who have great cooks for husbands. I know some families where the husbands are better cooks than the wives. But make sure that your wife is part of a community, that she's not just isolated at home all day. That's what led to the women's liberation movement, by the way. When the traditional society broke down, when the cottage industries broke down, when industrialization came, the man was out at work all day and the woman was home with nothing to do other than housework. Eventually the women said, we don't want this anymore, we're going to go out and compete with the men. Before industrialization, you had cottage industries, and women had significant, meaningful work they could do at home. Please, we women are not just pieces of furniture. We are personalities, which is a big surprise to some men in the world, and to some women too, evidently. But we really have our individual personalities, our individual desires, and our individual talents. Prabhupada said everyone has some extraordinary talent, and to use that talent for Krishna means successful life. And Prabhupada said one of the duties of a man is to engage his wife in activities of devotion. So this can generally only be done through some sort of extended family and some sort of village, because otherwise the responsibilities of just managing your home are too much. And it's all one person can do to keep on top of it, right? If you think of the traditional society, the women could do so many arts, right? And they were doing it by helping each other. So please encourage like that. Prabhupada also talks about that the man should not think he owns his wife. Very nice purport. That the wife also is to be given in Krishna's service, to receive guests, and for the service of people in general. So this, I think, is something very important. If you want to maintain a mood of sadhana in your house, and you want the wife and the children also to be enthusiastic, get practical level of help. The next thing is spiritual nourishment. Make sure you're spiritually nourished yourself. You know, you can't just give and 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 give. You have to, whoo! We're about to have our haircutting ceremony here. You know, you've got to plug your batteries in sometime. You've got to plug in your batteries sometime. You have to have high quality spiritual time for yourself. And this is also husband and wife helping each other. Women, let your husband have some time. He doesn't have to be with you all the time that he's not working. Let him have some time where he can do some service that he really likes without feeling it's a threat to your relationship. And some time for his reading and his service and his dealing with the other men. And same for the men. Let your wife sometime, give her some time to sit down, read Prabhupada's books, do some service that you like. Something that's really enlivening and nourishing. You have to have that. You can't just be giving to your children all the time without nourishing yourself. Okay, and that's, of course, doing our own regular sadhana with quality. Don't just rush through your own daily sadhana as something to get done. Get some deep relationship with Krishna and have some time when you're just focused on your own spiritual life, maybe once in a week, once in a month, maybe on Ekadasis, on festival days. Something where you're doing something that's really deeply nourishing for your relationship with Krishna. Don't wait until you have a heart attack or a nervous breakdown or your business fails before you decide that you need to do something to nourish yourself. This is not the International Society for Busyness Consciousness and Running Around Consciousness. We really want to establish a relationship with Krishna. Then we all need people in our life who are like cheerleaders. I don't know, in America at football games they have cheerleaders. Do you have those here at your, whatever you guys play here, rugby, or they were really into rugby in New Zealand when I was just there. You know, people who just go, yes, yes, you are great. You need people like that in your life, at least one person, preferably more, who just says, it's so wonderful that you're raising children. Now they may know what you're doing. If they know what you're doing, that's even better. Even if they don't know what you're doing, Somebody who just gives you just encouragement. We all need some encouragement. Life is tough. You know, life is tough. You just change your baby nappy, and then you had to change it again 5 minutes later, and then you had to change it again 5 minutes later, and you had to change it again 5 minutes later, and so you never got to the program on time. You know, and then you get there and they go, why are you always late? You know, you really need someone who's just going to, or your kid was up sick all night, or whatever. You know, you lost your job, and you don't know how you're going to make ends meet, and your wife is worried, and your kid is sick, and this, and somehow you're still chanting your 16 rounds, and you need someone to say, good job. All right, then we also need the opposite. We need people who will correct us. We need people who are going to come to our life and say, what's the quality of your japa? I notice you have a TV in your house. What are you watching on it? You doing okay? One person, at least one person in your life who can talk to you straight. And you'll listen, and you'll take it. At least one person who can say to you, you're off. And you say, yes. Thank you. Theoretically, that should be the guru. Doesn't always work like that. I once said this in where was I? I think it was Bahrain. Anyway, where I made this point that the guru is supposed to be the one who can correct you. But many times the gurus will say, you know, most of my disciples aren't really willing to be corrected. I can only just say a little bit to them. I can't say everything I want to say. The temple president said, at this temple, all of us will be willing to hear anything our Guru Maharaj says. So anyway, be that as it may, have at least one person in your life who's willing to correct you, where you're willing to listen. And then people that you can talk to about your service. People that you can, other people who are mothers or fathers or husbands or whatever. People who have just gotten married, or other people who've been married for 10 years, or someone else who's in your situation. Someone who's trying to be really good in their career and at the same time have good sadhana every day. Somebody who works a job that has difficult hours and has good sadhana every day. Someone who's going through what you're going through. Just like we have our ISKCON society to all encourage each other in Krishna consciousness. Have some friends who are in your same boat. So you can say, you know, my 2-year-old breaks everything in the house, and they'll say, well, that's normal, it's all right. You don't have to bring them in for psychological counseling. Someone who's been through the same sort of thing. And I want to end here with something perhaps a little unusual. And that is that in this material world, until we're above the modes of material nature, there's going to be ups and downs. And I have a paper here called The Ups and Downs of Life in a Material Body. And again, for those of you who came in late, I'm sorry the diacritics didn't print properly. We want to come to a point where we're steady in bhakti. Until we come to that point, we are affected by the modes of material nature. Which means sometimes we're going to feel very enthused in our sadhana. And sometimes it's going to feel like we're dragging. Sometimes it's going to feel like it takes every bit of our strength and determination just to get our sadhana done externally and mechanically. And other times, everything is just going to flow and be easy, and we feel very connected with Krishna. So I want to look first at Bhagavad Gita 14:22-25. This is where Krishna gives the symptoms of someone who's transcended the modes of material nature. I'm not going to read all of this, I'm going to read parts of it, and this is not the whole purport here. O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear. He who does not hate illumination, attachment, or delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear. He who does not hate illumination, attachment, or delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, knowing that the modes alone are active. Going to the purport. When a living entity, I'm not reading the whole thing. When a living entity stays in this material world embodied by the material body, it is to be understood that he is under the control of one of the 3 modes of material nature. When he's actually out of the body, then he's out of the clutches of the material modes of nature. But as long as he's not out of the material body, he should be neutral. As long as we have a material body, this body and mind are going to be affected by the modes of material nature. Sometimes we'll feel illuminated. Sometimes we'll feel attached. Sometimes we'll feel deluded. It's not me. The mind is not me. Sometimes my mind feels full of illumination, and I desire salvation and liberation from material bondage. Sometimes my mind is full of attachment. What about this? What about that? Well, I have to hear this. I have to go. Wow, I want to do this wonderful. Sometimes my mind's full of delusion. Oh, it's hopeless. I'm useless. I never do anything right. I wanted to give that up, and I can't give it up. I wanted to do this. I couldn't give it. I made this mistake. I got angry. I said this thing, and I'll never be Krishna conscious. I was trying so long. It's the modes of material nature. One who does not hate illumination, attachment, or delusion when they appear, nor long for them when they disappear, knowing that the modes alone are active. None of these are me. They're not me. I'm neutral. Oh, that's the mode of goodness. Hi, mode of goodness. There's mode of ignorance. Hi, mode of ignorance. It's not me. Now I'm going to read a section speaking about useful things from non-devotees, useful books from non-devotees. I'm going to read a section here from C.S. Lewis, who, if you know of C.S. Lewis, you probably know him as the author of the Narnia books for children. This is a section from a wonderful book called Screw Tape Letters. It's one of the favorite books of Jayadvaita Swami and Ravinda Sri Prabhu, so I'm in good company. And this is a section, I adjusted it slightly, because Screw Tape Letters is written in a backwards way. Please don't ask me to explain that, I don't have time. So I turned it around and wrote it in a forwards way. And this is a little indication of how you can use the ups and downs of the modes of material nature to get yourself to advance in bhakti and become steady. So I'm just going to read this and you can read along with me. Has no one ever told you about the law of undulation? As spirits, humans belong to the eternal world, but their bodies and minds inhabit time. This means that while their spirit can be directed to an eternal object, their bodies, passions, and imagination are in continual change, for to be in time means to change. Their nearest approach to constancy, therefore, is undulation, the repeated return to a level from which they repeatedly fall back, a series of troughs and peaks. You can see this undulation in every department of life. Interest in work, affection for friends, physical appetites, all go up and down. As long as one lives on earth, periods of emotional and bodily richness and liveliness will alternate with periods of numbness and poverty, which is exactly what Prabhupada just said in his purport, wasn't it? As long as we're in the material body, and have these be affected by the material modes. One must ask what use God wants to make of the dryness and dullness phase. In God's efforts to get permanent possession of the soul, He relies on the troughs even more than on the peaks. Some of His special favorites have gone through longer and deeper troughs than anyone else. The reason is this. The obedience which God demands is not the absorption of the soul's will into His, but quite a different thing. He wants servants who can become sons. He is full and flows over. He wants a world full of beings united to Him, but still distinct. And that is where the troughs come in. You might wonder why God does not make more use of His power to be sensibly present to human beings in any degree He chooses and at any moment. But the irresistible and the indisputable are the two weapons which the very nature of His desire forbids Him to use. Merely to override a human will, as His felt presence in any but the faintest and most mitigated degree would most certainly do, would be for Him useless. He wants the living beings to be one with Him, but yet themselves. Merely to cancel them or assimilate them will not serve. He is prepared to do a little overriding at the beginning. He will set them off with communications of His presence, which though faint seem great to them, with emotional sweetness and easy conquest over temptation. But he never allows this state of affairs to last long. Sooner or later he withdraws, if not in fact, at least from their conscious experience, all those supports and incentives. He leaves the entity to stand up on its own legs, to carry out from the will alone duties which have lost all relish. It is during such trial periods, much more than during the peak periods, that the living being is growing into the sort of being he wants it to be. Hence the prayers offered in the state of dryness are those which please him best. He wants the living being to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, he is pleased even with their stumbles. Illusion is never more in danger than when a human being, no longer desiring but still intending to do the will of God, looks round upon a universe from which every trace of him seems to have vanished, and asks why he has been forsaken and still obeys. Hope you enjoy that. And it is now 1:07, so I want to thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.